Okay, here we are again using X-Men. Now I'm going to use another movie for this example of showing motion being bad on the Sony A95L at the bottom, Samsung S95B at the top. Now the purpose for this video is to educate you as to the motion capabilities of Sony regardless of what you heard and who you heard it from. I am here to kind of provide the transparency that goes missing. Now, I did see some complaints in the last video that, well, we don't know what the motion processing settings are. No problem. We're going to go to the picture settings and go down to motion to show you what those are. So Cinemotion is set to high. I do not ever recommend turning that off. You can if you choose to. I do not. Now under motion flow, we have the following. We have smoothness film set to max, smoothness camera set to max. Clearness is set to low. Under no circumstance do I ever turn it to high because it just starts flickering, as you could probably pick up on camera. It's a useless feature at that point. I don't use it. So I only use these when I want to smooth out motion. It was maxed out the entire time. Oh, but don't worry. I'll also show you what it looks like with it turned off as well, proving that it's no better when you turn it off. I don't know who needs to hear this, but Sony really did just do that poorly. So we're going to play this scene out. We're going to fast forward it a little bit so we play as little bit as possible, okay? Now, I want you to pay close attention since some people wanted a little bit more of a play-by-play of what they're looking at here, okay? In the scene, there's going to be a horizontal panning, okay? You're going to pay attention to things like the windows, how they break apart, artifacts happen all around the windows. It gets very smudgy, very blurry. And then by comparison, the Samsung S95B is going to have the cleaner, clearer image. And that's what you're looking for. Now, in addition to that, in YouTube, you are going to have to slow it down to 0.25 if you can't see it. That will just help you see it a lot easier, and you can literally make out every single artifact that happens on both TVs, because Samsung's not perfect. I'm not here saying it's perfect. They have artifacts too, but it is nothing compared to what Sony has, and that is the point we are making here, considering the massive price difference between the two. So, now we're going to hit play and show you what happens right now. All of that. That's the ugly panning that I'm always referring to, and it's quite jarring. Okay, so now we're going to do the same exact scene, but this time we're going to turn off all motion processing as suggested by a few people. Now, again, I never recommend you do this. This is a really bad idea. I'll show you why. We're going to go ahead and turn off Cinemotion, and we're going to go ahead and turn off all motion processing. So there you go. We've defeated all motion processing, that awful thing that just ruins the picture, right? Okay, you let me know. Pay close attention to all the same details you want to look for around the window. You want to look for the horizontal plane as it's turning, as it's shifting, as it's panning. Let me know between the two which TV just looks better. Ready? Go. Sony became a blurry mess there. And if you slow it down to 0.25, you're going to notice the smearing effect that happens. It just looks so just not clear to the point where it's just like, it really ruins the experience, especially in fast-paced action scenes. In English, anytime it pans horizontally, it looks terrible on the Sony, more or less, most of the time, especially if there are objects that go across that plane. So what I mean is people walking, foliage in a car drive, windows in a building as they're flying by with an airplane, trees or mountains. It's going to look bad. You can't have a geometry go across the screen as you're panning, and that geometry also move. That's what trips up Sony. That's where Sony looks absolutely the worst. And so you can replicate this with Chapter 4, I believe. Chapter 4, and we're 23 minutes and 31 seconds into Pacific Rim, the first one. Okay, and I'm going to hit play here, and I want you to notice how bad it looks when they start running as it pans across here, and everybody's running. Slow it down into YouTube to see how bad that just looked. Now, we do have to run Sony some credit, okay? So one of the biggest reference points that I did use is Chapter 5 in Pacific Rim. And they did fix the issue that I've shown I believe that was the A90J when I showed this off. I also believe it happened on the A90K, A95K, but mostly the A90J had this issue. But this issue isn't a problem on the Sony A95L. So if you notice the sparks in the background, before it used to just go off everywhere and look really, really bad. Well, it doesn't look really, really bad anymore, especially this scene. It was covered in artifacts on those other TVs, where this one, not the case. That is a great job for Sony, because it does mean, while apprehensive, someone is listening to some sort of feedback somewhere about motion, and seeing how I'm the only one giving it, perhaps it could be my feedback. And if that's the case, I think that's a beautiful thing. They need to listen more, because I know exactly where they need to fix their motion to be a champion again. So hopefully at the end of this video, it's seen as the constructive criticism instead of just blind bashing, because that's not the case. The more competitive Sony is, the more they force everybody else to get on the same page, the more we win as consumers. That's the goal. So here we are with Pacific Rim. We are an hour, 25 minutes, 32 seconds in, and this is chapter 10. So at this point, they're about to throw a punch. When they throw this punch, it goes through the office building. All the papers in the office building on the Sony A95L look like absolute garbage. This is important because this shows you that, again, when you have the horizontal panning and you have particles, objects, any kind of geometry enter that panning motion at all, it's going to look problematic. If it's just still panning motion, it can look good and smooth. Up is a good example of this, where up can look fluid when the house is going by and it hits the van. But when you have motion like this, it just looks bad. I'll show you what I mean. All right, so I'm gonna hit play here, okay? Throws the punch, bam, look at how terrible all those papers look. Not great. Now you can slow it down in YouTube again to see like all the artifacts that kick up and just how like not smooth that was. But particles and stuff like that really trip up the A95L. Now we're gonna see the reverse also when the fist is pulled out, how bad that looks. Now I wanted to stop here and just, again, open it up again and show you what our motion settings are, right? How we have motion processing on, again, Cinemotion low, motion flow, maxed out completely, under custom. So again, this is just how Sony is performing, for anybody that's wondering, okay? So now that we did that, we're gonna go ahead and hit play again, and I want you to pay attention to how bad the motion gets when the fist is pulled out versus the Samsung S95B at the top. Not clear at all. It turns into a blur fest. And that's a big, big issue. So what you have to do is, again, slow this down to 0.25 and play back here on YouTube to be able to see that. But yeah, not fantastic stuff. Okay, so chapter 2. And we're gonna look at, we're about 12 minutes, 40 seconds into the movie. This is where you can see when there's shaking action or dynamic action, like an effect that happens, this also trips up Sony for whatever reason. So basically, if there's a moment where they're trying to intensify a specific injury or event by shaky cam effect, it's gonna look way worse on the Sony. So again, we're gonna start, we're gonna hit play, and we're gonna show you what it looks like as they get inside. Slow it down in YouTube to see all the jerkiness and how bad it looks. Literally terrible. Okay, about 18 minutes in, chapter 3. It's the very start of chapter 3. Notice again, when the workers start panning across the screen, this is where it's gonna look really, really bad. You're gonna notice just choppy, bad artifacting motion versus the Samsung S95B. Again, slow it down to 0.25 in YouTube playback to see what I'm talking about. We're gonna hit play. And it's just bad. Like the train, the workers intersecting with the train, with the sign, all that does not look good at all, right? And this is the kind of thing that we're gonna keep seeing. Now what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be panning around and pay close attention to the bottom, which is the Sony A95L, the top is the Samsung S95B. Panning shots just look bad. So I'm gonna pan around quickly and you can slow it down, but essentially Sony motion just gets really hard to watch. And this is important when you're in shooters and you need to do quick jerking motions. You're just not able to do that as comfortably on something like the Sony A95L. You just aren't, right? And it's panning in general, okay? Like all types of panning will create some sort of discomfort. Don't know why this is. Been talking about it for years now. They had more than enough time to fix it. They don't seem very interested in that. So I can only assume that this is something that is never going to get fixed, just simply because every year we hear upscaling, motion processing, Sony's the best at it, and nobody can basically touch them, and then it's the opposite. And it's really irritating because it's a fixable thing, I feel. I don't feel like this is something like firmware can't fix, or, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if they put enough effort into it, they can fix it. They just don't appear to be very motivated to.